The steel guardians of an empire in the dark and uncertain days of the Second World War, when the fate of nations rested on fragile supply lines and contested seas, one force stood as the backbone of Britain's survival, the Royal Navy. It was not just a fleet, it was a shield, a deterrent, a statement of power. And at the heart of that fleet were the battleships, floating fortresses of steel, thunder, and firepower. These ships were not merely weapons. They were symbols of British resolve. Each one carried the weight of empire, and each one would be tested in some of the most dramatic naval confrontations in history. Tonight, we explore the most formidable battleships of the Royal Navy during World War II, their design, their battles, their triumphs, and their tragedies. Part 1. HMS Hood. The mighty and the doomed before the war even began, one ship stood above all others in prestige and power. HMS Hood, commissioned in 1920. Hood was the largest warship in the world for over 2 decades. She was fast, heavily armed, and revered across the globe. To the British public, she was more than a ship. She was a national icon. With 8 15-inch guns and a top speed exceeding 30 knots, Hood was designed to hunt and destroy enemy cruisers and battleships alike. But beneath her impressive exterior lay a fatal flaw: her deck armor, insufficient against plunging fire at long range. That weakness would prove catastrophic. In May 1941, HMS Hood sailed into history during one of the most famous naval engagements ever fought, the Battle of the Denmark Strait. Her opponent, the German battleship Bismarck. As the two fleets closed in icy northern waters, Hood opened fire first. Within minutes, the German fleet returned fire. Then disaster. A single shell from Bismarck penetrated Hood's weak deck armor and detonated her aft magazines. The explosion was apocalyptic. Hood broke in two and sank within 3 minutes. Out of over 1,400 crew members, only 3 survived. The loss of HMS Hood sent shockwaves across Britain. It was not just a military defeat. It was a psychological blow. But it also ignited a relentless pursuit. The Royal Navy would hunt Bismarck, no matter the cost. Part 2. King George V-Class. The backbone of the fleet, if Hood represented the pride of the past, the King George V-Class battleships represented the future. Built under constraints of naval treaties, these ships sacrificed gun caliber for improved armor and modern fire control systems. Their main armament consisted of 14-inch guns, but what they lacked in size, they made up for in precision, protection, and versatility. Among them, 2 ships would become legendary: King George V and Prince of Wales, HMS Prince of Wales. Into fire freshly commissioned and still plagued by mechanical issues, HMS Prince of Wales was thrust into action almost immediately. She joined HMS Hood in the fateful battle against Bismarck. Despite being incomplete and suffering from gun malfunctions, Prince of Wales managed to land several hits on Bismarck, damaging her fuel tanks and limiting her operational range. This damage would later prove crucial in Bismarck's eventual destruction. But Prince of Wales' story did not end there. In December 1941, she was deployed to the Far East alongside the battlecruiser Repulse. Their mission: deter Japanese expansion. Instead, they became targets. Without adequate air cover, both ships were attacked by waves of Japanese torpedo bombers. Prince of Wales fought valiantly, but it was a new kind of warfare. Air power had arrived. After multiple torpedo strikes, she capsized and sank. It was a turning point in naval history. The age of the battleship was beginning to fade, replaced by the dominance of aircraft carriers. HMS King George V, the hunter while Prince of Wales fell. Her sister ship would rise to prominence. HMS King George V played a central role in the final act of the Bismarck saga. After days of relentless pursuit, the crippled German battleship was finally cornered in the Atlantic. King George V, alongside HMS Rodney, opened fire. Shell after shell battered Bismarck into silence. Her guns were knocked out, her superstructure destroyed. It was not just a victory, it was vengeance. King George V would go on to serve throughout the war, escorting convoys, supporting operations, and standing as a pillar of British naval strength. Part 3, HMS Rodney. The battleship that broke Bismarck, HMS Rodney, was unlike any other battleship in the Royal Navy. She carried 9 massive 16-inch guns, larger than those of the King George V class, and they were mounted in an unusual forward configuration. Rodney was not fast. She was not elegant, but she was devastating. During the final battle against Bismarck, Rodney closed the distance to point-blank range. What followed was less a battle and more an execution. Rodney's massive guns tore into Bismarck with overwhelming force. At one point, she even fired torpedoes, an extremely rare action for a battleship. The German giant was reduced to a burning wreck. Rodney had proven that, when properly positioned, a battleship could still dominate the seas with raw firepower. Part 4, HMS Warspite. The grand old lady of one ship embodied experience, resilience, and sheer fighting spirit. It was HMS Warspite. Nicknamed the Grand Old Lady, Warspite had already seen action in World War I. By the time World War II began, she was considered outdated, but what followed would redefine her legacy. Warspite participated in numerous operations across multiple theaters, from Norway to the Mediterranean. At the Battle of Calabria, she achieved one of the longest-range naval gun hits in history. Later, during the Battle of Cape Matapan, Warspite helped annihilate an Italian fleet in a night engagement. Her guns spoke with deadly precision, but her greatest strength was endurance. She survived bomb hits, torpedo damage, and repeated attacks. Time and again, Warspite returned to battle. Even during the Normandy landings, she provided critical naval gunfire support. By the end of the war, Warspite had earned more battle honors than almost any other British warship. She was not the newest. She was not the most powerful. But she was, without question, one of the greatest. Part 5, HMS Nelson. The silent striker sister ship to Rodney, HMS Nelson shared her distinctive design and heavy armament. But Nelson's story was one of persistence rather than spectacle. She spent much of the war escorting convoys and providing strategic support. In 1941, she struck a mine and suffered severe damage, but returned to service. Later, she would play a key role in the Mediterranean, supporting Allied landings and operations. Nelson's presence was often quiet, but always significant. She was a reminder that not all victories are dramatic. Some are built on endurance, reliability, and constant pressure. Part 6. The end of the battleship ERA. By the end of World War II, it was clear. The era of the battleship was coming to an end. Aircraft carriers had proven their superiority. Airplanes could strike from beyond the horizon, rendering even the most heavily armored ships vulnerable. The sinking of Prince of Wales and Repulse had demonstrated this reality early in the war. Yet, despite this shift, battleships remained vital. They provided heavy fire support. They escorted convoys. They served as powerful deterrents. And in moments like the destruction of Bismarck, they reminded the world of their unmatched firepower. Conclusion: legacy of steel, the Royal Navy's battleships were more than machines of war. They were symbols of a nation under siege, and a nation that refused to fall. From the tragic loss of HMS Hood, to the relentless pursuit of Bismarck, to the enduring resilience of HMS Warspite, these ships carried history on their decks. Today they are gone, scrapped, sunk, or preserved only in memory. But their legacy remains in every naval doctrine, in every warship that sails, and in every story of courage at sea. Because in the darkest hours of World War II, it was these giants of steel that stood between Britain and defeat. OUTRO, if you enjoyed this deep dive into the Royal Navy's greatest battleships, make sure to subscribe, like the video, and share it with fellow history enthusiasts. And let me know in the comments,